Welcome to Talk channel. I'm Yulia Kondratyonak, and today I'm gonna tell you about the basic principles of pruning fruit trees, in particular apple trees. So, here's a young apple tree. It went into dormancy without pruning. It's February now, so it's a good time to trim the canopy. Why February exactly? In February, there are no cold outbreaks anymore that could damage wood, including fresh cuts. The fact is, if the temperature drops down below 20 degrees Celsius, this has a very bad effect on a fresh cut. The exposed fresh tissue gets freeze-dried, and such cuts don't heal well. That's why we schedule main pruning specifically for this time period. What should we look at before we start pruning a tree? First of all, take a critical look at its outline. According to the rules, a garden tree should have a balanced, that is, evenly branched out canopy. The best canopy shape for our gardens is round, hemispherical, or slightly stretched up. I don't think it's feasible for individual gardeners to go in for modern spindle or slender spindle training systems. Spindle-trained trees are heavily trimmed. They require good protection and very good microelement fertilizer support, and we don't need this. Complex training systems are used to get the maximum yield from a small area. We are going to develop a tree that looks attractive in the garden, provides a good yield, and is easy to care for, which is important. That is, when we prune a tree, we must bear in mind that we will come to the same tree to pick apples and care for the tree, and it has to be comfortable. The main factor in pruning is your comfort. The second thing we pay attention to before we start pruning is whether the tree has any diseased branches. Remove and dispose of them immediately after you are done with pruning and using garden sealer on the cuts. Actually, if you leave prunings with canker or lesions on the ground or in some place at the back of your garden, they will be spreading disease for at least 2 years. So, we go around the tree and check for disease or canker. Next, we carefully inspect the tree for crossing or rubbing branches. Then, we carefully inspect the tree from all sides to see what goes beyond the desired canopy contours. So, we have inspected the tree, we have decided what we are leaving and what we are removing, and we start pruning. We generally use hand pruners to trim branches. The pruners must be sharp, clean, and the blade nut must be tightened so that the blade's passing clearance is adjusted properly. Otherwise, branches get crushed and such cuts heal very badly. So, let's get started. There's a little branch here. It was broken, most likely while picking apple. It was broken, it dried up, and developed a fungus called cytosporosis. See, it has this symptom called goose skin. The fungus is not very dangerous for our trees, but if a tree is weak, cytosporosis can cause death of 1-year-old and even older wood. How do we make a cut? When you cut, it's very important that this cutting edge must be on the side of the branch that we are cutting. I put my hand to here and click, done. I've cut it out and the tree will start to heal itself. Luckily, we don't have any more diseased branches. And now we are starting to cut out inward growing branches. They congest the tree, they block out light and create excessive moisture inside the canopy. And the result, the tree just suffers and fruit can't develop well in the shade. This branch here grows inwards the canopy, as you see. We can remove it completely, or we can prune it for fruit by cutting it back to a bud facing outside, in the direction we want. Always slant the cut at a small angle above the bud. Click. We have removed the branch. Bear in mind that you should be able to access the tree freely and touch the trunk from at least two sides. I can't do it from this side. As you can see, the canopy is overcrowded here, and I can hardly access the tree even though it's still young. If you leave it like this, after a while, you won't be able to access the tree for fruit picking or pruning, so we must open out the center. How do we do it? We cut out the branches from the two sides, or from four sides if the tree is really large, that block access to the center. This branch blocks access and this branch too. You see there's a congestion here. Cut branches outside the collar. What is a collar? Many of you ask what a collar is and where exactly it is located on a tree. A collar is a small swollen area of tissue around the base of the branch. Collars are especially distinct on older branches. You almost can't see them on 1 or 2 or 3-year-old wood. Here, take a look. You see a small swollen area at the branch union. We must cut just outside without leaving a stump and without cutting this collar. The thing is that most of the restorative tissue accumulates here. And if we cut this branch, the tissue grows rapidly and finally closes the cut, and the wound heals quickly. So, we continue making our way to the body of the tree to open out the center. This branch blocks access. I'm not going to cut it out completely. I'm going to cut it back to a lateral branch. Remember that it is better to make one big cut rather than a big number of small cuts, because numerous small cuts weaken the tree and may lead to canker. So, I'm cutting this branch back to lateral branch. There's a very good branch. You can already see flower buds on it, and these are our future apples. We don't touch this branch yet, but we note that in the future we may remove it to one of lateral branches too. In the meantime, we are just shortening 1 year wood. We shorten it to the lower bud, which goes outwards from the trunk. The same way, we'll shorten this terminal shoot that grows upwards. Here's something that I was talking about before, rubbing branches. We don't want this, so we are removing. Here we are also removing everything that rubs, and we are also removing all branches that grow inward, the canopy. Okay, now the next point. Here there's a branch that grows downwards. On the one hand, it has good flower buds, and they will bear fruit. But when apples develop, and each flower bud has 6 flowers, that is potentially 6 apples, this branch will bend down to the ground, to the grass. First, closeness to the soil creates high humidity. Such apples are often discolored and prone to disease. Second, such branches just make it difficult for you to care for the tree. So, for this reason, we are choosing a branch that goes laterally and a little upwards, and we are cutting back to it. It's also good to shorten strong 1-year-old wood. Why? Because shortening will result in developing new flower buds in the next growing season. Flower buds means our future fruit. You can see that last year there was an apple here. It got rotten, and rot from the stalk got into this fruit formation, into this cushion, and it died. We can't leave it. Otherwise, the disease will continue to develop, eventually cause dieback, and also infect neighboring branches. So we are choosing a good bud, a developed growth bud, and we are cutting this branch above the bud. There's a little defect right here, and we are removing it too. There was a stump left, but the bud died, and if we leave it, we'll have the same situation again. The disease continues, causing a gradual dieback. Remember to remove all prunings from the garden. Now, this branch is very weak, and the growth is small. We are cutting it out too. If a branch goes very much sideward, especially to the spacing between rows, and it may later be difficult to take care of, we shorten it by pruning above the bud. An important advice when pruning: when you cut back 1-year branch or older branches, make sure that the bud you cut to is a growth bud rather than a flower bud. It would be incorrect to cut back to this bud. Due to its physiology, this bud will not be able to close the cut. On the contrary, if you cut to this growth bud, you see it's a growth bud, it's more pointed, it's much smaller, and it sits tight on the branch. Then nutrients will come here in spring to make it grow, and we'll also close the cut that we are doing now. By the way, during pruning, you can assess the condition of your trees and how they have overwintered. If the wood in the cut is nice and green rather than dark and brown, this means the tree has overwintered very well and it hasn't been freeze damaged. And you did a good job last year, taking good care of your garden, and your trees were well prepared for the new season. For a downward branch, if you don't want to completely cut it out, and if you just want to move it upwards, choose an upward-facing bud. When it awakens in spring, it will develop a new shoot that will pull this branch upwards. Look carefully and remove dead mummified fruits or rotten fruit because it's a source of infection. We are removing them. When pruning, leave lateral spurs that grow at a straight or almost straight angle. They are more likely to produce flower buds. Lots of gardeners want their trees to stay compact. How do we do this? We systematically reduce the height of the tree. Here, as you can see, the tree has been pruned more than once, each time with heading cuts to lateral branches. You see, there was a cut here, then a lateral spur awoke, went up, and became a leader. We are doing the same again this year. From these branches, we are choosing the one that fits perfectly into the axis of our tree and has a good terminal shoot that will become a leader. Here, look now. This branch will become a leader. The one that goes horizontally will be one of the future scaffold branches. Here, look, we have chosen a leader, but here there is a competing branch that also grows upwards and will try to make the branch a leader. We are removing it as there should be no competitors. We will later remove all prunings from the garden after cutting. I carefully examine the tree to make sure it has a balanced canopy shape and it doesn't protrude into the space between the rows where we walk, and at the same time it has an open center. Now look, you can even go inside the tree and touch the top. After pruning, cuts must be covered with garden paint or pruning sealer. Preferably choose the garden paint with added fungicide. You don't have to use pruning sealer for cuts smaller than 1 centimeter inside. They perfectly close without it. but we must carefully apply sealer and rub it into the wound in this area, especially in the places where a new tip must develop. In this way, wounds heal very quickly and develop no canker, and this helps the tree to stay healthy. Special care must be taken to cover pruning wounds on the body and scaffold branches. Why? The fact is that if canker develops here, it will be more difficult to cure. And if canker develops extensively and you notice it late, you can lose scaffold branches in the best case or the whole tree in the worst case because you haven't covered the cut on time. I wish prosperity to you and your home. Subscribe to our Procvetok channel. I hope to see you again in the new growing season.